everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a seriously creepy story for you, something that still gives me chills just thinking about it. It's about me and my sister Claire, and this nightmare we lived through in our family's old place, Ashwood House. Trust me, this isn't your typical ghost tell it's raw. It's real, and it messed us up bad. If you're into haunted houses and things that go bump in the night, you're gonna want to stick around for this one. Before we dive in, please hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, let's get this channel growing. Give the video a like if you're feeling it. And don't forget to tap that bell so you never miss a spooky update. Alright, let's get into it. Here's what happened that day. Ashwood House turned on us. I never thought I'd step foot in Ashwood House again. Not after Mom died and left it to me and Claire. Growing up, it was this cozy place full of summer memories, big porch, creaky floors, that old oak smell bud. When we pulled up that afternoon, it was like the life had been sucked out of it. The paint was peeling off in chunks, windows all cloudy with grime, and the front yard was just weeds choking out dead grass. It had been empty for years, ever since Mom swore she'd never go back after Grandma Rose passed. She always said there was something wrong with that house, something she couldn't explain, but we figured it was just grief talking. Claire and I only came to sort through whatever junk was left, and maybe sell the place. The air felt heavy as soon as we got out of the car, like it was pressing down on us. And I swear, the second I touched the doorknob, my stomach twisted. It wasn't just nerves. Something about the house looked wrong, like it was waiting for us. I brushed it off. Told myself it was just an old dump now. But man, I should have listened to that gut feeling. The inside was worse than I expected. Dust so thick it coated my shoes. Cobwebs hanging like curtains, and this stale, sour smell that made my throat itch. The living room still had Grandma's old furniture, all faded and sagging, with these creepy little stains on the couch I didn't want to think about. Claire started poking around, saying we should check the upstairs later. But I couldn't shake how quiet it was, like unnaturally quiet. No birds outside, no wind, just our footsteps echoing on the warped wood floor. Then I heard it, this faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from the kitchen. I froze, thinking maybe a branch was hitting a window. But when I peeked in, the room was empty, just cracked counters and a rusty sink. The tapping stopped as soon as I stepped inside, but I felt this chill crawl up my spine, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around fast, nothing there, but my heart was pounding. Claire didn't hear it, said I was imagining things, but I knew what I heard. That was the first sign something was off, and it only got worse from there. After that tapping, I tried to play it cool. You know, not freak Claire out or myself. Honestly, we decided to head upstairs to check Mom's old room, figuring we'd find some boxers or whatever she left behind. The staircase was a nightmare. Every step groaned like it was about to snap, and the banister wobbled under my hand, all sticky with years of dust and something greasy I couldn't place. The higher we climbed, the colder it got, even though it was a warm day outside. By the time we hit the landing, my breath was fogging up a little, which made no sense. The hallway stretched out in front of us, long and narrow, with faded wallpaper peeling off in strips, showing these weird, dark patches underneath. All the doors were shut tight, and the light coming through a cracked window at the end barely touched the shadows. I don't know why, but I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something standing there. Claire noticed it too. She got real quiet, just clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. That's when we heard the floor creak behind us, slow and deliberate, like footsteps following us up. We spun around, but the stairs were empty, just that dim light flickering from below. My mouth went dry, and Claire whispered, "You heard that right." I nodded, trying to laugh it off, saying maybe the house was settling or some crap like that. But my voice sounded shaky even to me. We pushed on to Mom's old room, the door sticking when I turned the knob like it didn't want us going in. Inside it was a mess bed, unmade, sheets yellowed and torn, and this old dresser tipped over with drawers spilling out papers and junk. There was a mirror on the wall, all smudged and cracked, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move in it. Not me, not Claire, just this shadow that darted out of sight. I blinked, and it was gone, but my skin was crawling. Then Claire gasped. Pointing at the floor, there was this little music box, the one Grandma Rose used to play for us, sitting in the middle of the room like someone had just put it there. It wasn't dusty like everything else. It looked brand new. I don't know how to explain it, but seeing that thing made my chest tighten like it wasn't supposed to be there, like it was watching us somehow. I bent down to pick up that music box, my hands shaking a little because it just didn't feel right being there, all clean and shiny in this wrecked room. The second my fingers touched it, this faint melody started playing Grandma Rose's lullaby, the one she'd hum when we were kids. It was slow and tinny, like the box was winding itself up, and I dropped it fast. Stumbling back, Claire yelped, "What the hell, Mark?" But I couldn't even answer. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it'd bust out of my chest. The music kept going, getting louder, echoing off the walls, and I swear it wasn't just in the room, it felt like it was inside my head. I kicked the box away, and it skidded under the bed, finally shutting up. But the silence after was worse somehow. Claire looked at me like I'd lost it, but she was pale as hell too. I mumbled something about it being old wiring or a trick, but deep down, I knew that was bullshit. That thing turned on by itself, and it freaked me out more than I wanted to admit. The house felt alive, like it was messing with us. We didn't even get a chance to catch our breath before the next thing hit. The door to the room slammed shut hard, like someone had thrown their whole weight against it. Claire screamed, and I lunged for the knob, twisting it, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the damn thing was locked from the outside, but there was no keyhole, no latch, nothing. I pounded on it, yelling for it to open, while Claire started crying, saying we should have never come here. The air got thick, heavy with this smell like burnt wood and something rotten, and the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath again. Then we heard this low, raspy whisper coming from behind us, right where the bed was. It wasn't words, not really, just this guttural sound, like someone trying to talk through a throat full of dirt. I turned slow, dreading what I'd see, and there was nothing, just the empty bed and that damn music box peeking out from underneath. But the whispering didn't stop. It kept going, circling us, and I felt this cold brush against my arm, like fingers grazing my skin. I'm not ashamed to say I almost pissed myself right there. I grabbed Claire's arm and yanked her toward the door again, slamming my shoulder into it because that whispering was getting louder, and I wasn't about to stick around to find out what it wanted. The wood creaked under my weight, and after a couple hard hits, the door finally gave, flying open so fast I nearly fell into the hallway. We stumbled out, panting, and I slammed it shut behind us, like that'd do any good. The whispering stopped, but my ears were ringing, and my arms still tingled where I'd felt that cold touch. Claire was shaking, wiping tears off her face, asking me what the hell that was, but I didn't have answers. Just this growing dread that we weren't alone in Ashwood House. The hallway felt tighter now, the shadows thicker, like they were pressing in on us. I kept glancing at the other doors, half expecting them to swing open, but they stayed shut. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for its next move. My skin wouldn't stop prickling, and every breath I took tasted like that nasty burnt smell. We didn't say it out loud, but we both knew we should have left right then, grabbed our stuff, and bolted. Instead, like idiots, we crept down the hall toward Grandma Rose's old room, thinking maybe we'd find something to explain this crap. The door was already cracked open, and when I pushed it wider, the hinges screeched so loud it made my teeth hurt. Inside, it was like stepping into a tomb, dark, musty, with this huge four-poster bed covered in a stained quilt. The curtains were drawn tight, but little slivers of light snuck through, catching dust floating in the air. There was an old vanity in the corner, mirror all fogged up, and a rocking chair that looked like it'd collapse if you touched it. Then I saw it on the nightstand, this leather diary, cracked and worn, with Rose Sullivan scratched into the cover. My stomach dropped. It was Grandma's. No question. Claire reached for it, but before she could grab it, the rocking chair started moving slow at first, then faster, creaking back and forth like someone was sitting in it. We just stood there, frozen, watching it sway, and I swear I heard a sigh, soft and sad, right next to my ear. That rocking chair kept going, creaking louder, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. Like if I blinked, whatever was making it move would jump out at us. Claire grabbed my sleeve, her nails digging in, whispering, "Mark, let's go, please." But my feet wouldn't budge. The air in the room got icy, and that sigh I'd heard turned into this faint humming Grandma Rose's lullaby again, but warped, like it was coming from underwater. I finally snapped out of it and snatched the diary off the nightstand, shoving it into my jacket. The second I did, the chair stopped dead, slamming back so hard the floor shook. We bolted for the door, my heart racing, and I didn't even care that I tripped over a loose board anything to get out of that room. When we hit the hallway, I looked back, and I swear the chair was tilted forward, like it was leaning after us. My chest was so tight I could barely breathe, and all I could think was that this house didn't want us touching her stuff. It felt personal, like it was pissed. We stopped at the top of the stairs, panting, and I pulled out the diary, hands trembling so bad I almost dropped it. Claire was freaking out, saying we should just leave it, but I had to know what was in there, why this place was so screwed up. I flipped it open, and the pages were brittle, ink smudged, but I could still read Grandma's shaky handwriting. She wrote about hearing him, Grandpa Thomas, after he died, his voice calling her from the attic, begging her to come up there. She said he wouldn't leave her alone, that he'd scratch at the walls and move her things, and she was scared he wanted her to die with him. My gut twisted reading that. Mom always said Grandpa was a mean bastard when he was alive, but this was next level messed up. Then we heard a slow, heavy thud from above us, like something big dropped in the attic. Claire's eyes went wide, and I slammed the diary shut, but the thuds kept coming, steady, like footsteps pacing right over our heads. Whatever was up there knew we were reading about it, and it didn't like it one bit. Those thuds from the attic got louder, like whatever was up there was stomping harder just to mess with us. I grabbed Claire's hand and dragged her toward the stairs, saying we needed to get downstairs, maybe out of the house entirely. But my legs felt like jelly. Every step down was a fight. The air was so cold now it burned my lungs, and that burned trodden smell was choking me. Halfway down, the lights flickered, just these old bulbs swinging in the hall below. And for a second I thought I saw a shadow stretch across the wall tall, hunched, moving fast. I blinked, and it was gone. But Claire whimpered behind me. Did you see that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was locked up, and all I could focus on was getting to the front door. But when we hit the bottom, the door was shut tight. We'd left it open when we came in. I know we did. I yanked at it, cursing under my breath, but it wouldn't move, like someone was holding it from the outside. The house wasn't letting us go that easy. Claire started banging on the door, screaming to let us out, while I turned back to the living room, looking for anything to break a window or something. That's when I noticed the pictures on the mantel, old family photos. Me and Claire as kids. Mom, Grandma Rose all turned face down. I hadn't touched them, and neither had Claire. My stomach flipped, and as I stepped closer, one of them slid off the edge, smashing on the floor. Glass sprayed everywhere, and I jumped back. But then the others started moving too slowly at first, then faster, like an invisible hand was shoving them off one by one. Crash after crash. The sound was deafening, and Claire spun around, her face white as a sheet. The last photo, Grandpa Thomas, staring straight ahead with those cold eyes, didn't fall. It just sat there, upright, while everything else was trashed. Then the whispering started again, low and angry, coming from every corner of the room, and I felt that same cold brush on my neck, sharper this time, like nails digging in. We were trapped, and whatever was here was done playing subtle. I swatted at my neck where that cold scratch hit, spinning around like I could catch whatever did it. But the room was empty, just me, Claire, and that damn photo of Grandpa Thomas staring us down. The whispering turned into this growl, deep and guttural, rolling through the walls like thunder you feel in your bones. Claire grabbed my arm, her voice shaking. Mark, it's him. It's gotta be him. And I knew she was right. Grandma's diary. The footsteps, that picture, all pointed to Grandpa Thomas. I told her to stay close, and we backed away from the mantel, my eyes darting around for anything to defend ourselves with. The growling got louder, and then the couch this heavy, sagging thing jerked forward a foot, scraping the floor so hard it left gouges. I yelled, stumbling back, and Claire tripped over a shard of glass, cutting her hand. She didn't even cry out, just stared at the blood like she couldn't believe it was real. The house was waking up, and it was pissed we were still here. I pulled Claire to her feet, her hand dripping red on the floor. And that's when the lights went out complete black, like someone flipped a switch. My phone was in my pocket, so I fumbled for it, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. The screen lit up, casting this weak glow, and I swung it around, trying to see. The living room looked wrong, and that light shadow stretched too long, twisting up the walls like they were alive. Then I saw her, Grandma Rose, or what looked like her, standing by the stairs. She was faint, all gray and blurry, her face sad and tired, just watching us. My breath caught, and I nudged Claire, who gasped so loud it echoed. Grandma didn't move, didn't speak, just pointed upstairs with this slow, shaky hand. The growling stopped for a second, and I thought maybe she was trying to help us. But then something slammed into the wall behind her, hard enough to crack the plaster, and she flinched, fading out like smoke. Whatever was with us didn't want her there, and that scared me more than anything so far. Claire was shaking so bad I had to hold her up, her bloody hands smearing on my jacket, and I couldn't stop staring at where Grandma Rose had been. That wall crack was still there, jagged and fresh, like something huge had punched through from the other side. I whispered, "We gotta move," and dragged her toward the kitchen, thinking maybe the back door would work since the front was a lost cause. The house was dead quiet now. No growling, no whispers, just our ragged breathing and the crunch of glass under our shoes. My phone light barely cut through the dark, and every shadow looked like it was reaching for us. When we got to the kitchen, the air was so thick with that burnt stench I gagged. It was worse here, like something had been rotting for years. The back door was right there, rusted and warped, but when I grabbed the handle, it was ice cold and stuck tight. I yanked harder, swearing, and then I felt something wet drip onto my neck from above. I looked up, and the ceiling was stained dark, leaking this black, tar-like crap that stank like death. I wiped it off fast, my stomach churning, and swung the light up. Nothing up there. Just that oozing stain spreading slow across the plaster. Claire gagged too, covering her mouth, and muttered, "What is that?" I didn't know, didn't want to know, but I kept pulling at the door, desperate to get us out. Then the sink turned on full blast. No warning, just this gush of murky water spilling over the edge, splashing onto the floor. I jumped back, and Claire screamed, "Mark, it's moving!" The water wasn't just pooling, it was sliding toward us, slow and deliberate, like it had a mind of its own. My light caught it, and I saw it wasn't clear. It was thick, reddish brown, like blood mixed with mud. The dripping from the ceiling got faster, plopping into the mess, and the growling started again, low and close, like it was right behind us. I spun around, shining the light, and for a split second, I saw him, Grandpa Thomas, tall and shadowy, his face twisted and wrong, standing by the fridge. He was gone when I blinked, but my knees buckled, and I knew he was here, screwing with us, trying to keep us in this hellhole. I couldn't move for a second, just staring at where Grandpa Thomas had been, my phone shaking in my hand so bad the light was jumping all over. Claire was crying again, tugging at my arm, begging me to do something. But my brain was screaming to things, run or fight, and running wasn't working. That bloody water was still creeping closer, lapping at our shoes, and the dripping from the ceiling was like a drumbeat, now steady and loud. I grabbed a chair from the table, this rickety old thing with a busted leg gand, jammed it against the back door, smashing the handle over and over. The wood splintered, and I thought maybe we had a shot, but then the chair flew out of my hands, crashing into the wall like someone ripped it away. My arm stung from the force, and Claire shrieked, backing into me so hard we almost fell. The growling turned into this laugh, low, nasty, like he was enjoying the sand. It was coming from everywhere, bouncing off the cabinets, the floor, the damn sink. We were rats in a trap, and he was playing with us. I swung the light around, yelling, "Leave us alone." Like that'd do, Jack. But I was losing it, panic, clawing up my throat. That's when I saw Grandma Rose again, flickering in the corner by the pantry, her hands clasped like she was praying. She looked terrified, her eyes locked on something behind us, and I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. The shadow was back, Grandpa Thomas, taller this time, his outline sharper, looming in the doorway to the living room. He didn't have a face, not really, just these hollow spots where eyes should have been, and a mouth stretched too wide. The air went dead cold, and my phone light dimmed, like he was sucking it dry. Claire grabbed my hand, squeezing so tight it hurt, and whispered, "She's trying to tell us something." Grandma pointed again, this time at the floor, and I saw it, the music box, sitting there in the middle of that bloody water, gleaming like it was brand new. That laugh roared louder, and the shadow lunged forward, fast, like it was coming straight for us. I don't know how I didn't pass out right there. I shoved Claire behind me, my heart slamming so hard I thought it'd explode, and grabbed the music box out of that disgusting water without even thinking. The second I touched it, that laugh cut off dead silent, and the shadow froze, like I'd hit pause on him. My hands were slick with that reddish muck, and the box felt warm, pulsing almost, which made my skin crawl even more. Claire was whimpering, "What are you doing?" But I didn't know, just acting on instinct, hoping Grandma Rose was guiding me somehow. I wound the key on the side, my fingers slipping, and that lullaby started up again, soft and shaky. The shadow Grandpa Thomas twitched like it hated the sound and took a step back. Grandma's ghost flickered brighter, nodding at me, and I cranked it harder, the tune getting louder. The kitchen lights flickered back on, weak and yellow, and that bloody water stopped moving, just sitting there like normal water now. For a second I thought maybe we'd won, that we'd pushed him back. But then the whole house shook like an earthquake. But worse, like something massive was slamming into the foundation. Dishes crashed out of the cabinets, shattering on the floor, and the ceiling cracked open, raining dust and that black tar stuff all over us. I ducked, covering Claire, and the music box slipped out of my hands, hitting the ground with a clang. The lullaby warped, slowing down into this awful, grinding noise, and Grandpa's shadow roared back to life, charging at us so fast I barely had time to react. I grabbed the nearest thing, a rusted iron poker from the fireplace in the corner, and swung it wild. It hit something not solid, but heavy, like swinging through Medan. The shadow screeched, this high-pitched wail that made my ears ring. He backed off, shrinking into the living room, and I kept swinging, yelling at him to get out, my voice cracking. Grandma Rose was still there, faint now, mouthing something I couldn't hear over the chaos. The house was fighting us, and I didn't know how much longer we could hold on. I gripped that poker like my life depended on it. Hell, it probably didn't, chased that shadow into the living room, swinging at anything that moved. Claire was right behind me, clutching the music box now, winding it up again even though her hands were shaking so bad she could barely turn the key. The lullaby sputtered back to life, and every note seemed to piss Grandpa Thomas off. Maury screeched again, and the walls started bleeding that black tar, dripping down in thick streaks. The furniture was going nuts, couch sliding, chairs tipping over, pictures flying off the mantel like they were thrown. I swung the poker at his shadow, and it connected again, this time with a jolt that shot up my arm like I'd hit a live wire. He staggered, shrinking a little, and I kept at it, screaming at him to leave us alone. Grandma Rose flickered in the corner, her face desperate, pointing upstairs again like she was begging us to go. I didn't get it twi up there, but Claire grabbed my sleeve, yelling, "The attic! Mark, she means the attic." We bolted for the stairs, tripping over debris, the house groaning like it was gonna collapse on us. The air was so cold my teeth hurt, and that growling was back, chasing us up every step. I kept the poker raised, ready to swing, while Claire cranked the music box, the lullaby cutting through the noise. When we hit the landing, the attic hatch was right above us, this old, warped trapdoor with a rusty pull chain. I yanked it down, and the ladder dropped with a bang, dust exploding in my face. The growling turned into this furious howl, and I felt something grab my leg cold, strong, like a hand made of ice. I kicked hard, swinging the poker down, and it let go with another screech. Claire was sobbing, "Go, go, go." So I shoved her up the ladder first, following fast, my whole body shaking. The attic smelled like mold and death, and when I pulled myself up, I saw it Grandpa Thomas's shadow, huge now, filling the doorway below, clawing at the air like he couldn't climb after us. Not yet, anyway. The attic was pitch black, except for the faint glow from Claire's phone, which she'd pulled out when the music box started winding down. I slammed the trapdoor shut behind us, but it didn't feel like enough. That howling was still right below, and the wood rattled like he was pounding on it. The air up here was suffocating, thick with that moldy stench and something sharper, like old blood. My light caught stacks of boxers, broken furniture, and cobwebs so thick they looked like nets. But what freaked me out most was this old trunk in the corner, big, dented, with claw marks scratched deep into the lid. Claire whispered, "Mark, look," and pointed at the floor. Footprints in the dust, big and uneven, leading right to that trunk. My stomach dropped. Someone or something had been up here, pacing around. I clutched the poker tighter, my knuckles white, and told Claire to stay back. The howling stopped, but now there was this scratching, slow and deliberate, coming from inside that trunk. My mouth went dry, and I knew we weren't alone up here. I took a step toward the trunk, every nerve screaming at me to run the other way, but we had nowhere else to go. Claire wound the music box again, her hands trembling, and that lullaby filled the attic, shaky but loud. The scratching paused, and I heard Grandma Rose's voice, soft, faint, right in my ear, saying, "Open it." My heart skipped, and I glanced around, but she wasn't there, just her words hanging in the air. The trapdoor banged once, hard, and Claire yelped, dropping her phone. I didn't think, just lunged for the trunk and flipped the lid up, poker ready to swing. Inside was a mess of old clothes, papers, and this cracked photo of Grandpa Thomas, his eyes scratched out with something sharp. The scratching started again, louder, and the trunk shook like something was trying to climb out. Then I saw his shadow, seeping up from the bottom like smoke, forming right in front of us. Claire screamed, and I swung the poker down hard, smashing through the photos. The shadow wailed, loud enough to rattle my skull, and the whole attic shook like it was gonna cave in. That wail from Grandpa Thomas's shadow went on forever, piercing my ears until I thought they'd bleed, and the poker vibrated in my hands like I'd hit a live wire. The shadow thrashed, breaking apart into tendrils of black smoke, then snapping back together, bigger and angrier. Claire was screaming behind me, cranking the music box so fast the lullaby sounded like a shriek itself. I swung again, aiming for where his head should have been, and the iron sliced through, sending this cold gust blasting past me. The trunk rocked, papers flying everywhere, and that photo of him burned under my feet, actual flames, small but real, eating it up. The shadow roared, lunging at me, and I felt its weight slam into my chest, knocking me back into a pile of boxes. My ribs ached, and I couldn't breathe right, but I kept gripping the poker, swinging blind. Claire yelled my name, and I saw her holding the music box up like a shield, tears streaming down her face. The shadow recoiled from the sound, shrinking a little, and I knew we had to keep going. I scrambled up, coughing on dust and that nasty tar smell, and charged at him again, slamming the poker down with everything I had. This time, it stuck right in the middle of his chest. If you could call it that hand, he froze, letting out this guttural choke that made my hair stand up. The attic floor cracked under us, splinters flying, and the trap door burst open, banging against the wall. Grandma Rose appeared, clear as day now, standing between us and him, her hands outstretched. She looked so tired, so sad, but she was yelling, no sound, just her mouth moving, like she was telling him to stop. The shadow grandpa twisted, clawing at her, but she didn't budge. The music box hit its last note and wound down, and in that silence, he let out one final shriek, loud enough to shake the walls, then shot upward, smashing through the attic ceiling. Wooden shingles rained down, and I threw myself over Claire, waiting for the whole place to collapse. But it didn't, just went still, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stayed hunched over Claire for what felt like forever, my arms burning from holding the poker, waiting for something else to hit us. The attic was trashed holes in the ceiling, dust swirling in the air. That trunk tipped over with its guts spilled out, but it was quiet now, too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, thumping loud in my ears, and Claire's shaky breaths under me. I finally sat up, wincing at the ache in my chest, and looked around. Grandma Rose was still there, faint again, standing by the busted trapdoor. She didn't say anything, just gave us this small, sad smile, then faded out, like she'd used up whatever she had left. The shadow Grandpa Thomas was gone. No growling, no cold fingers, nothing. I wanted to believe we'd beat him, but my gut was still churning, telling me it wasn't over. Claire grabbed my hand, her voice barely a whisper. Is he gone? I didn't know what to say, just nodded, hoping I wasn't lying to her. We crawled to the ladder, every move slow and painful, like the house had drained us dry. The poker was still in my grip, knuckles locked around it, and Claire clung to the music box like it was the only thing keeping her sane. Going down was a blurm. Legs shook so bad I almost fell, and the stairs creaked louder than ever, like they were mocking us. When we hit the bottom, the living room was a mess. Furniture flipped, walls streaked with that black crap, glass everywhere. The front door was wide open now, swinging a little in the breeze, and outside, the sky was gray, storm clouds rolling in. I don't know how it opened, didn't care, just grabbed Claire and stumbled out, sucking in fresh air like I'd been drowning. We didn't stop until we were at the car, and even then, I kept looking back at Ashwood House. It sat there, silent and dark, but I swear I saw something a-flicker, a shadow move past an upstairs window. My skin went cold all over again, and I floored it out of there, not stopping until we were miles away. We didn't talk, the whole drive back just sat there, windows down, letting the wind blast away the stench of that house still clinging to us. My hands were tight on the wheel, and every few minutes I'd check the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Grandpa Thomas's shadow hunched in the back seat. Claire kept the music box on her lap, her fingers tracing the edges, like she was scared to let it go. When we finally stopped at a gas station, she broke the silence, voice all hoarse. "What the hell happened back there, Mark?" I just shook my head, staring at the dashboard, because I didn't have a clue none of it made sense. Grandma Rose helping us, Grandpa trying to drag us down, that house turning into a damn nightmare in one day. My neck still stung where he'd scratched me, and Claire's hand was wrapped in her scarf, blood seeping through. We were alive, but it didn't feel like a wind jest, like we'd escaped something that wasn't done with us. I pulled out Grandma's diary from my jacket, the leather all crinkled now, and flipped through it again while Claire got us coffee. The last page was the worst. She wrote about locking something of his in the attic, something he'd never let go of, and how she hoped it'd hold him. Guess it didn't. I kept thinking about that shadow in the window as we left, how the house went still, but not empty. It was like he'd retreated, not vanished, waiting up there, maybe for the next idiot to walk in. We never went back, never even talked about selling it. It's just sitting there, rotting, as far as I know. Sometimes I wake up hearing that lullaby, or feeling that cold grip on my leg, and I wonder if he's still pissed, still tied to Ashwood House. Claire won't say it, but I know she feels it too. That place marked us, and I don't think it's ever letting go, not really. When we got home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ashwood House had followed us somehow. I kept checking the locks, peering out the windows, like I'd see that shadow lurking in the yard. Claire crashed on the couch, still holding that music box, and I just sat there watching her sleep, too wired to close my eyes. Every creak in the apartment made me jump, and that burnt smell, it was faint, but I swear it was stuck in my nose, like the house had burrowed into me. I tried washing it off, scrubbing my hands raw, but my neck still had these red marks, thin and jagged, where he'd grabbed me. They didn't bleed, just sat there, itchy and cold, like a reminder. I kept the poker by my chair, telling myself it was stupid, but I wasn't taking chances. The diary was on the table, and I couldn't stop glancing at it. Grandma's words about him wanting her to join him kept looping in my head. What if he wanted us to? Sleep didn't come easy that night, and when it did, it was full of that damn lullaby. The next morning, Claire was quiet, too quiet. She didn't want to talk about it, just stared at her coffee while I tried to act normal, like we hadn't just fought a ghost in a house that hated us. I asked if she was okay, and she just nodded, but her eyes were all red, like she'd been crying when I wasn't looking. She finally said, "I heard her, Mark Ronmeyer," before I fell asleep. She said thank you. That hit me hard, because I'd felt it too. That little smile she gave us before fading out. But it didn't feel like Pess, it felt like she'd passed the torch. Like we'd taken her place in whatever messed up game Grandpa Thomas was playing. I didn't say that to Claire. She was spooked enough. We agreed to burn the diary, get rid of it. But when I went to grab it, the pages were blank, just yellowed paper, no words, like they'd been wiped clean. My stomach sank, and I chucked it in the trash anyway, hoping that'd be the end of it. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. After tossing that diary, I thought maybe it'd feel better, like we'd cut some tie to Ashwood House, but it didn't. The whole day, I was jumpy. Every shadow in the corner of my eye made me flinch, and I kept rubbing my neck where those marks were, still cold to the touch. Claire wasn't much better. She'd put the music box in a drawer, but I caught her staring at it later, like she was scared it'd start playing on its own again. We didn't leave the apartment, just sat there, trying to watch TV or eat, but nothing felt right. The air was oft too still, too heavy, like the house had left a piece of itself with us. I kept thinking about that shadow in the window, how it didn't chase us out, just watched. Was he stuck there, or was he biding his time? I couldn't shake the idea that we'd pissed him off more by fighting back, and now he had our scent. It's dumb, I know, but it felt true. That night, I woke up to Claire shaking me, her face pale and sweaty, saying she'd had a dream about the attic. She said Grandpa Thomas was up there, pacing, scratching at the trunk, and he kept turning to look at her, even though he didn't have eyes, just those black holes. She heard him growl her name, real slow, like he was tasting it. I tried to calm her down, saying it was just a nightmare, but my voice was shaking too because I dreamed it too, same damn thing. Only I felt his hand on my leg again, pulling me toward that trap door. We didn't sleep after that, just sat up with the lights on, clutching coffee. We didn't drink. The marks on my neck started itching worse, and when I checked in the mirror, they were darker, almost purple, like bruises forming. Claire's hand was the same. Her cut wasn't healing, just sitting there, red and raw. It was like Ashwood House wasn't done marking us, and I started wondering if we'd ever really gotten away. By midday, I couldn't take sitting around anymore. Had to do something, anything, to shake that feeling of Ashwood House still breathing down our necks. I told Claire we should get out, maybe grab lunch, act like normal people for an hour. But she just nodded, barely looking at me. When we stepped outside, the sun was bright, but it didn't help. Every gust of wind felt like that cold attic air brushing my skin, and I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see him standing there. We made it to this little diner, ordered food we didn't eat, and I caught Claire staring at her reflection in the spoon, like she was looking for Grandma Rousseau or worse. My neck was throbbing now, and I hit it with my collar. But the waitress gave me this weird look, like she could tell something was off. I tried joking with Claire, saying we'd survived a haunted house, but it fell flat. She just whispered, "Did we?" And I didn't have an answer. The whole time, I kept hearing that lullaby in my head, faint but there, like a radio I couldn't turn off. Back home, Claire finally cracked. She pulled the music box out of the drawer and smashed it on the floor, stomping it until it was just bits of metal and wood. I didn't stop her. Hell, I wanted to do it myself. She was crying, yelling about how she couldn't stand it anymore, how she felt him watching her every second. I hugged her, telling her it was over, but I didn't believe it. The air shifted when she broke it, got heavier, like we'd just kicked a hornet's nest. My neck burned, and when I checked, the marks were spreading, thin lines creeping toward my shoulder. Claire's hand was worse, two red streaks running up her wrist, like an infection, but deeper. Wrong. We didn't say it, but we both knew it wasn't normal. It was him, or the house, still clawing at us. I grabbed the poker from the living room, propped it by the door, and we just sat there waiting for night, dreading it. The lullaby in my head got louder, and I swore I heard a growl under it, low and far away, but close enough to make my blood run cold. Night hit hard that day, like the dark was thicker than usual, pressing against the windows. Claire and I didn't turn off the lights, couldn't stand the idea of shadows moving where we couldn't see them. I kept pacing, poker in hand, while she curled up on the couch, staring at the smashed music box pieces, like they might stitch themselves back together. The marks on my neck were pulsing now, hot one second, cold the next, and I caught myself scratching at them until they bled a little. Claire's hand was hidden under a bandage, but she kept wincing, like it was throbbing too. Neither of us said it out loud, but we were waiting for what I didn't know. Just something to prove Ashwood House wasn't done with us. The TV was on, some dumb show, but the sound kept cutting out, replaced by this static hum that made my teeth ache. I told myself it was the old wiring, but deep down, I knew better. It felt like the house, reaching out, whispering through the noise. Around midnight, it started a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from the kitchen window. My stomach dropped, and I froze mid-step, locking eyes with Claire. She heard it too. Her face went white, and she mouthed, "No, no, no." I crept over, poker raised, and peeked through the blinds. Nothing out there, just the empty street. Street lights flickering, but the tapping kept going, slow and steady, like it was taunting us. I yanked the blinds up, thinking I'd catch it, but the glass was clear. No branches, no wind, nothing. Then it stopped, and for a second, I thought I'd imagined it until I saw my reflection in the window. Behind me in the glass was Grandpa Thomas's shadow, just standing there, those hollow eyes staring right into mine. I spun around, swinging the poker, but the room was empty. Claire screamed anyway, scrambling back, because she'd seen it too in her reflection, not mine. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out, and all I could think was, "He's here. He followed us." I dropped the poker when I spun around, and it clattered loud on the floor, snapping me out of that frozen panic. Claire was hyperventilating, clutching the couch like it'd save her, and I grabbed her shoulders, telling her to breathe, that we'd figure this out. But my voice was shaking, and my eyes kept darting to the window, waiting for that shadow to pop up again. The tapping was gone, but now there was this low, hum-like, the static from the TV, but deeper, vibrating in my chest. I checked the marks on my neck in the hall mirror, and they were worse, dark purple, snaking down to my collarbone, and they hurt like hell when I touched them. Claire's bandage was soaked through, red and wet, and she wouldn't let me look at it, just kept muttering, "He's not gone, Mark, he's not." I wanted to argue, say we'd beaten him, but that reflection, those empty eyes stuck in my head. The apartment didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like Ashwood House had stretched its fingers all the way here, I picked up the poker again, hands sweaty, and started checking every room, flipping on lights, looking under furniture, like that'd do anything against a ghost. Claire followed close, too scared to stay alone, and we moved like kids afraid of the dark, jumping at every creak. In the bedroom, I found the diary, sitting on my nightstand, pages blank but open, like it had crawled out of the trash. My knees went weak, and I yelled for Claire to come see. She gasped. We threw that out, and I just nodded, too freaked to talk. The hum got louder, buzzing in my ears, and then the lights flickered, all of them, on and off, like a strobe. Something cold brushed my arm, quick and sharp, and I swung the poker wild, hitting nothing but air. Claire cried out, saying she felt it too on her leg, like a hand grabbing. We backed into the living room, and that's when the TV cut to static, loud and crackling, and in the noise, I swear I heard him growl my name, slow and pissed, like he was right there with us. That growl and the static snapped something in my, lunged at the TV and yanked the plug out of the wall, silencing it, but my ears were still ringing with his voice. Claire was shaking so bad she could barely stand, and I pulled her down to the floor with me, huddling against the couch like it'd shield us. The lights stopped flickering, but the hum didn't. It was everywhere now. In the walls, the floor, my skull. My neck was on fire, the marks pulsing like they had a heartbeat, and when I touched them, my fingers came away sticky with something dark, not blood, thicker, like that tar from the house. Claire's bandage was dripping now, soaking the carpet, and she kept whispering, he's here, over and over. I wanted to tell her no, that we were safe, but I couldn't lie not when I felt it too. This weight pressing down like the air itself was turning against us. I gripped the poker tighter, scanning the room, waiting for him to show up again. Then the temperature dropped fast, like stepping into a freezer. My breath fogged up, and Claire's teeth started chattering, her eyes wide and locked on something behind me. I turned slow, dreading it, and there he was, Grandpa Thomas's shadow, taller than before, filling the doorway to the kitchen. Those hollow eyes were on us, and his mouth stretched into this sick grin, all wrong and jagged. I yelled, swinging the poker, but it passed right through him, clanging against the wall. He didn't flinch, just stepped closer, silent now. No growl, no laugh, just this awful stillness. The diary on the nightstand flew across the room, smacking into the couch beside us, pages flapping open to nothing. Claire screamed, make him stop, and I swung again, useless, while that cold hand brushed my face this time, slow and deliberate, like he was marking me again. My whole body locked up, and all I could think was, we didn't escape. He brought the house with him. I couldn't breathe right with that cold hand on my face. It was like ice sinking into my skin, and my vision blurred, everything tilting. Claire was screaming my name, clawing at my arm to pull me back, but I was stuck, staring into those black holes where his eyes should have been. The poker slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud, and I felt my legs give out, dropping me to my knees. His shadow loomed bigger, filling the room, and that hum turned into a roar, shaking the walls so hard a picture crashed off the shelf. I saw Claire grab the poker, swinging it wild, and it sliced through him again. Nothing, just air, but he flinched, like it annoyed him. She kept going, yelling at him to leave us alone, her voice cracking with every swing. The cold on my face let up a little, and I gasped, sucking in air, my hand scrabbling on the carpet. He wasn't done just pissed at. I knew he had to do something fast, or we weren't making it through this. I crawled toward Claire, my neck screaming with pain, and grabbed her leg, telling her to stop swinging. We weren't hurting him, just making him madder. She dropped the poker, sobbing, and we backed into the corner, nowhere else to go. His shadow shifted, slow and deliberate, like he was savoring this. And then I saw her. Grandma Rose, faint and flickering, right beside him. She looked so small next to him, her hands raised like she was pushing him back, and her mouth was moving again. No sound. The diary slid across the floor, stopping at my feet, and I snatched it up, hands shaking so bad I tore a page. Claire whispered, "What's she doing?" And I didn't know, just flipped through the blank pages, desperate, until I saw it. One line, scratched in fresh ink, "Sing it." My heart jumped, and I yelled at Claire, the lullaby, "Sing it." She stared at me like I was nuts, but I started humming it, shaky and off-key, that tune from the music box. Grandma nodded, faint but clear, and his shadow froze, that grin twisting into something ugly. I kept humming that lullaby, my voice cracking like a kid's. But I didn't stop. Not with Grandma Rose nodding at me like it was our last shot. Claire caught on, joining in, her voice wobbly and wet with tears. But it grew stronger as we went. The shadow Grandpa Thomas started twitching, like the sound was nails on a chalkboard to him, and his grin melted into this furious snarl. The room shook harder, books flying off shelves, the couch sliding into the wall with a crash. But we didn't let up. I grabbed the poker again, holding it like a lifeline, and swung it while we sang, aiming for his chest. This time, it hit something not solid, but thick, like cutting through Fogand, he screeched, loud enough to make my ears pop. Grandma's ghost flared brighter, pushing at him, and I saw her lips moving too, matching our tunes. The marks on my neck burned hot, then cold, and I felt something lift, like a weight I didn't know was there. His shadow lashed out, tendrils of black smoke whipping at us, and one caught Claire's arm, yanking her forward. She screamed, dropping the tune, and I grabbed her, pulling her back while swinging the poker wild. It sliced through the tendril, and she fell against me, gasping. We picked up the lullaby again, louder, desperate, and Grandma stepped closer to him, her hands on his chest now, like she was holding him in place. He roared, thrashing, and the windows rattled, one cracking down the middle. The diary flew open beside me, pages flipping fast, and that tar smell hit hard, choking me, but we kept singing. His shadow started breaking, apart bits peeling off. Dissolving into the errant, he clawed at Grandma, but she didn't budge. Then, with this awful gut-wrenching shriek, he shot upward, smashing through the ceiling like in the attic, plaster raining down. The hum stopped, the shaking stopped, and Grandma gave us one last look, peaceful, finally before fading out completely. The room went dead still after that. No hum, no growling, just the sound of our ragged breathing and plastered dust settling around us. I dropped the poker, my arms shaking so bad I couldn't hold it anymore, and Claire slumped against me, her face buried in my shoulder. The ceiling had a jagged hole where he'd gone through, and I kept staring at it, waiting for him to come back, but nothing moved. The marks on my neck stopped burning, just this dull ache now. When I touched them, they felt smaller, like they were fading. Claire's arm was red where he'd grabbed her, but the streaks on her hand were lighter too, like whatever poison he'd left was draining out. The diary was still open on the floor, that one line, seeing it smudged, but there, like Grandma had scratched it in with her last bit of strength. I wanted to feel relieved, but my gut wouldn't let Emmett. Was too sudden, too quiet, like the house had just decided to shut up for a minute. We didn't move for a while, just sat there in the wreckage of our apartment, too scared to trust it was over. The lights stayed on, steady now, and the air warmed up, but it didn't feel right, like the warmth was fake, a trick. I finally got up, legs wobbly, and checked the window. No shadow, no tapping, just the empty street outside. Claire whispered, "Is he gone for good?" And I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. All I managed was a shrug. The hole in the ceiling stared down at us, and I kept thinking about Ashwood House, how it had gone still too, but that shadow had lingered in the window. We cleaned up what we could, swept the plaster, tossed the diary in the trash again, but every creak made us jump, every shadow made us freeze. I kept the poker close, and Claire wouldn't let me turn off the lights. We'd fought him off, maybe even won, but it didn't feel like victory, just like we'd bought some time. Morning came slow, gray light creeping through the blinds, but it didn't chase away the feeling that something was still off. I hadn't slept, couldn't, not with that hole in the ceiling staring at me like an eye. And Claire looked wrecked, dark circles under her eyes, still clutching a pillow like it'd protect her. We didn't talk much, just shuffled around, making coffee we didn't drink. The marks on my neck were almost gone, just faint lines now, but they itched every time I passed a mirror, like a warning. Claire's hand was better, too still raw, but no more streak sand. She kept flexing it, like she was testing if it was really hers again. The apartment was a mess, but we didn't care. Fixing it felt pointless when I couldn't shake the idea that he'd left something behind. I kept glancing at the trash where we dumped the diary, half expecting it to be back on the table, but it stayed put. Still, the quiet was too loud, like the house or him was holding its breath, waiting for us to let our guard down. Claire finally broke the silence, her voice small. "You think Grandma saved us?" I nodded, picturing that last look she gave us, peaceful, but tired, like she'd spent everything she had. It made me feel better for a second, knowing she'd fought with us. But then I remembered how strong he'd been, how he'd smashed through ceilings twice now, What if she'd only slowed him down? I didn't say that out loud. Claire didn't need more to worry about, but I kept the poker by the couch, just in case. We tried watching TV, something normal, but the static flickered every few minutes. And once, I swear I heard that lullaby in it, faint and warped. Claire flinched too, so I turned it off fast. The day dragged on, and we stayed close, jumping at every Noza car horn, a neighbor's door, anything. Ashwood House was miles away, but it didn't feel gone. It felt like it had stretched out, tagged us, and I couldn't shake the thought that he'd be back. One way or another, by afternoon, I couldn't stand being cooped up anymore. Every corner of the apartment felt like it was watching us, judging us for thinking we'd won. I told Claire we should take a walk, get some air, maybe trick ourselves into feeling normal again. She didn't want to, but I dragged her out anyway. Poker left by the door like a promise I'd be back for it. Outside, the world looked regular people, walking dogs, cars honking, but it didn't fit right, like I was seeing it through a fog. My neck tingled every time the wind hit it, and Claire kept her hands stuffed in her pockets, hiding that cut. We didn't talk about the house, but it was there, hanging between us, heavy as hell. I caught myself looking at shadows too long, waiting for them to stretch or move, and once, I thought I saw him just a flicker in an alley, gone when I blinked. Claire grabbed my arm then, hard, and I knew she'd seen it too. We sped up, not running but close, like kids scared of the dark. Back home, the apartment was exactly how we'd left it, messy, quiet. That hole in the ceiling still gaping, but it felt different, like someone had been there. The trash can was tipped over, diary pages scattered on the floor, blank but crumpled, like they'd been clawed at. My stomach twisted, and Claire whispered, "Mark, we didn't do that." I checked the locks fine, all shut down the windows, nothing broken, but that didn't mean jack. I swept the pages up, hands shaking, and burned them in the sink this time. Watching the paper curl and blacken until it was ash, the smell hit me hard, burnt, sour, like Ashwood House, and Claire gagged, opening a window fast. We didn't say it, but we both knew he'd been here, or something had messing with us, leaving a mark. The poker stayed in my hand after that, and we didn't leave the lights off, not even for a second. It was like living with a ghost you couldn't see, just feel, and I started wondering if we'd ever really left that damn house behind. Night crept in again, and I hated how fast it got dark, like the day didn't even try to stick around. Claire and I were back on the couch, lights blazing, poker propped against my leg, just staring at nothing. The ash from the diary was still in the sink, and I couldn't bring myself to clean it out. Felt like if I touched it, I'd stir something up. My neck was almost normal now, just faint scratches, but they'd itch out of nowhere, like a signal. Claire's hand was scabbing over, but she kept picking at it, nervous, like she didn't trust it to heal. We tried talking about dumb stuff, work, groceries, anything to avoid the house, but it didn't work. Every sentence trailed off, and we'd go quiet, listening for that hum or tap we couldn't forget. The apartment felt smaller, walls too close, and I kept glancing at that ceiling hole, half expecting his shadow to drip back through. It didn't, but the waiting was worse, like he was teasing us, letting us stew. Then it happened, soft at first, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. A creak, slow and steady, coming from above. Claire's head snapped up, eyes wide, and I grabbed the poker, my heart kicking into overdrive. It wasn't loud, not like the attic stomps, just this gentle back and forth, like someone rocking in a chair. We didn't have a rocking chair, ever did, but the sound kept going, rhythmic, deliberate, right over that damn hole. I stood up slow, telling Claire to stay put, but she followed anyway, too scared to be alone. I pointed the poker at the ceiling, like that'd do anything, and the creaking stopped, just cut off, leaving this thick silence. My mouth was dry, and I muttered, "It's nothing," but I didn't believe it. Claire whispered, "He's still up there," and I couldn't argue, felt it too. That weight, like he'd carved out a piece of Ashwood House and parked it right above us. We didn't sleep that night, just sat there, listening, waiting for the next move. That creaking didn't come back, but it left us wired, jumping at every little noise, the fridge humming, a car outside. Even our own breathing sounded too loud. I kept the poker in my lap, fingers locked around it, while Claire hugged a pillow, her eyes darting to the ceiling every few minutes. The hole up there was just a black patch now. No movement, no shadows, but it felt alive, like it was staring back. My neck itched again, sharp and sudden, and when I scratched it, my nails came away with a little blood. Those marks weren't as gone as I'd thought. Claire noticed, her face palling, and she checked her hands. Same deal. The scab cracked, a thin red line seeping out. We didn't say it, but it was like he'd tagged us. Little reminders that he could reach us whenever he wanted. The lights stayed on, bright as hell, but they didn't help. The room still felt dim, like something was sucking the glow out. I kept thinking about Grandma Rose, how she'd faded with that smile. Did she really stop him, or just buy us a breather? Morning hit, and we were wrecked. Scofie didn't touch the exhaustion, just made my hands shake worse. Claire finally said it, voice barely there. We can't stay here, Mark. I nodded, because she was right. The apartment wasn't safe. Not with that creaking, those marks, the way the air never felt clean. We packed bags fast, just essentials, like we were fleeing a fire. I grabbed the poker, shoving it in my duffel, and Claire stuffed the diary ash into a jar, like sealing it up would keep him away. When we stepped outside, the street looked normal sunup. Birds chirping, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on my back. We crashed at a motel an hour away, cheap and loud with truckers, hoping distance would matter. It didn't the first night there. I woke up to that lullaby in my head, soft but clear, and Claire was already awake, staring at the wall, saying she'd heard it too. My neck burned, her hand bled a little, and I knew then. Ashwood House didn't need us close to keep us. He'd latched on, and we were stuck with him. That motel room was a dump-stained carpet, buzzing neon sign outside, but it was better than home, or so I thought. Claire and I barely unpacked, just dropped our bags and sat on the sagging beds, staring at each other like we didn't know what to do next. The lullaby stuck with me all day, looping in my head, and I caught myself humming it without meaning to. Claire snapped at me to stop, her voice sharp, and I felt like an idiot. My neck was a mess now, scratches reopening every time I thought they'd heal, and her hand wasn't much better, oozing slow under a fresh bandage. We turned on the TV, some loud game show, trying to drown out the quiet, but it didn't work. I kept hearing that creak again, faint, like it was sneaking under the noise. The room felt off, too small, too warm, then too cold, like it couldn't decide. I checked the window, nothing out there, just the parking lot, but I swore I saw a shadow flit past, quick and gone. Claire saw it too, her breath hitching, and we didn't sleep, just waited for morning with the lights on. Daylight didn't fix anything. It just showed how wrecked we were, bags under our eyes, hands trembling. I tried calling a friend, thinking maybe talking would help, but the line crackled with static, and I heard that growl again, low pissed, my name twisted in it. I hung up fast, heart pounding, and Claire didn't even ask, just knew. We ditched the motel, drove another hour to a different one, like running would shake him off, but it was the same deal. Lullaby in my head, her staring at shadows, marks on us getting worse. I started thinking about Ashwood House, how it had gone still after he smashed out. Maybe he wasn't stuck there anymore. Maybe he'd hitched a ride with us. The poker stayed close, but it felt useless now. Swinging at him hadn't stopped this. Claire whispered one night, "What if he never leaves?" And I didn't have an answer, just this sick feeling that she was right. We'd fought him, sure, but he'd won something bigger. Us tagged and hunted no matter where we went. We stopped running after that second motel. Didn't see the point when he kept finding us, like a dog with a scent. We ended up back at the apartment, bags still packed, because at least here we knew the layout, knew where to hide if it came to that. The hole in the ceiling was still there, patched with tape and hope. But it didn't stop the creaking. It'd start up random, usually at night, just loud enough to keep us awake. My neck was a map of scratches now, thin and red, and Claire's hand looked like it had never healed, always wet with something that wasn't quite blood. We didn't talk about him much, just lived around him, lights on, poker by the door. No music, ever. The lullaby didn't need the box anymore. It had hit me out of nowhere, soft and mocking, and Claire had flinched like she heard it too. Shadows moved, sometimes corners, mirrors. Once in the shower, steam manned. We stopped looking, just pretended it was normal. But it wasn't, and we knew it. He was here, woven into the walls, our skin, our heads. One night it got bad. The creaking turned into thumps, heavy and slow, like he was pacing right above us. I grabbed the poker. Claire grabbed me, and we stood there, staring at the ceiling as dust trickled down. The thumps stopped, and then the lights flickered, not out, just dim, like he was sucking them dry. My neck burned so bad I yelped, and Claire's bandage soaked through, dripping red on the floor. We didn't swing, didn't sing, just waited, too tired to fight. Then it all stopped. No thumps, no flicker, No lullaby, just silence, sudden and thick, like he'd flipped a switch. The marks on my neck cooled off. Claire's hand stopped bleeding, and the apartment felt empty again, like it had before Ashwood House. We didn't trust it, still don't, but it's been quiet since. Weeks now. No shadows, no sounds. I keep the poker close, check the mirrors, and wonder if he's gone or just waiting, biding his time like he did back there. That silence is held, but it's not peace, it's like the quiet before a storm, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Claire and I still jump at shadows, still sleep with the lights on, but nothing's moved, nothing's growled. Not since that night. The marks on my neck faded to scars, thin and white, but they itch when it's dark, like a memory that won't die. Claire's hand healed, sort of scabbed over, but she says it aches sometimes, deep, like he's still in there. We don't talk about Ashwood House, don't even drive by that road, but it's always there. In the back of my head, this rotting heap that spat us out but kept a peace. The poker's by my bed, the dye rash is still in that jar, and I check the ceiling hole every day, waiting for dust to fall. It doesn't, but I can't shake the feeling he's up there, or somewhere, watching, grinning with those hollow eyes. We beat him once, maybe, but it doesn't feel like winning, just surviving, and barely. Sometimes I dream about it, Grandma Rose smiling, then him smashing through, and I wake up tasting that burnt tar stink, hearing the lullaby faint in my ears. Claire gets it too. She wake up gasping, saying she felt his hand on her leg again. We don't know why it stopped. Did Grandma hold him back for good? Or did he just get bored? No answers. Just this nagging dread that it's not over, that he's tied to us, to that house, forever. I drove past a turn to Ashwood once, just close enough to see the trees, and my neck flared up so bad I had to pull over. Claire saw a shadow in the rear view, swore it was him, and we haven't gone back since. It's been months now, and it's quiet to Quietand. I'm stuck wondering if he's gone, or if he's just waiting for the right moment to start it all again. I don't think I'll ever know.